It's Friday. Welcome to Watson Weekend. I am your host, Jessica Lasesky, and we have Nick Kaplan joining us again. We are almost
Hello.
through January week 3. I'm calling this National Virus Month, and that's what I'm deeming January. Everyone I know is sick. My kids have been sick multiple times. I don't know. How are you feeling, Nick? You hanging in there?
I'm surviving, which is kind of it's like the operative word in my house, just survive. And thank God it's Friday and I'm back.
Yes, you're
So
here.
yes, and today is actually I think we've taken to some random facts, and I think today here's some of the things that happened as we sort of head into the show. Let's see, the largest diamond ever, 106 carats, was found in 1905.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
I did not know this, but our producer put in front of me that the first demonstration of a television happened in London
Oh,
in
wow.
1926.
I
Oakland
didn't know
Raiders
that.
entered the AFL in 1960. As a father of two dads and a huge advocate for equality in women, the first female position appointed to a president, Janet Trevely, in 1961.
Pour one out for her.
And
Way to
I'm
go.
gonna I'm gonna make us feel old.
Oh,
Kimmel debuts in 2003.
oh wow.
And I'm going to make us sad. In 2020, Kobe Bryant leaves us, which is still to this day
Um,
pretty devastating.
it is
So,
very devastating.
so Jess, partner, what do we have lined up this week?
Yeah, for those of you who are not familiar with the show, welcome. This is your little dose of headline news, Friday fun, but we also try to bring in some facts to keep you moving through your week. So the format that we've got this week, we're going to go through some headlines, call a little headline hangover, and give you guys our take on it. And then we're going to walk right into what we've been doing every week for the first couple of weeks of this year and diving into what's happening with the landscape, what's happening with this notion of organizations and the organizations of the future, and then our brand spotlight. And we're going to talk about Nick's favorite brand, Rent the Runway. I have a hot take on it. I can't wait. It's going to be really fun.
But because it is Friday and we like to keep the conversation barstool ready, just like the playoffs, it's playoff time, and we are hitting the business end of the season as earnings and things come out. As we go into this weekend, big weekend, we got Purdy, Jackson, Goff, Mahomes. So as we look ahead, who do we have coming in to talk about all these happenings in the world, NFL playoffs, the format of the show, the org of the future brand? Who do we have?
Yeah, so we have the CEO of Shipium, Jason Murray, and I'm really excited because Jason and I haven't met before, but you have an amazing reputation, and so we're looking forward to getting your take on not only the industry topics, hot news, but just learning a little bit more about you. So Jason is a regular in a Slack group that our friend Rick Watson started. So we get to see Jason's take every couple of days on the industry news and events. So it's great to have him live. So Jason, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to meet both of you. It's weird to kind of have online friends and finally meet
Yes,
them in person. I
Right. Well, I
met
got to
Nick
meet.
at
Yeah, I was gonna
Nick at
say.
NRF actually, and it's you got to do the the height thing first of how you envision the person versus what they actually look like. So it's great.
I'm always
go
kind
ahead.
of freaked out about height. So anyway, you're tall.
I feel like I'm kind of a sloucher on Slack, so people always think I'm a lot shorter than I am. So it's kind of kind of sit down in the sloucher in Zoom. Sorry. So people always think I'm kind of always down on the thing.
Yeah,
So anyway,
yeah. I have that same problem, but I wear the big girl heels, so I've notched myself up.
yeah,
Get
exactly.
get the height. Yeah.
Well,
Well, Jason, you have. Oh, go ahead, Nick.
which of us will do a flip the coin? I think it's you. We'll give the highlights on some pretty big highlights on Jason.
Jason has really been a world-class citizen as it relates to the notion of e-commerce, shipping. He's in supply chain. So essentially, he has guided the company's vision towards becoming the world's best e-commerce supply chain platform prior to founding Shipium. And I'm reading because I do not want to mess this up. Spent 19 years at Amazon in roles such as VP of Retail Systems, VP of Forecasting and Supply Chain, and own the software and operations that power Prime, Subscribe, and Save, and pricing. So we really do have an industry veteran with lots of good inside info. And you are also University of Washington grad. So who would you pull for? We talked about this NFL playoffs and things kicking off. Who's kind of your hot team?
I'm a Seattle, kind of rampant Seattle sports fan.
You're a
So
12.
the first thing that happens is you just go for pure hate. So I'm like anyone that can beat the 49ers, I'm happy with that.
Exactly.
So I was a Green Bay fan last weekend. I'm a super big Detroit fan right now. But that's
I'd
kind
love
of
to see that.
anytime the 49ers lose, I'm happy. Just kind of years and years of painful rivalry. But I actually think in the playoffs, I think Baltimore, I feel like it's their year for some reason. I just think they look really good, both defensively and I think they're all set up to do the whole thing. But we'll see. That's why they play the game, right?
I agree. I
Well,
was actually at the Ravens game last weekend. So my sons
okay.
are into NFL football. My 8-year-old's favorite player is Lamar Jackson. It's in watching Lamar in how he operates and navigates the field.
definitely
Right.
MVP worthy.
Yeah, I think you watch. One of the great things about watching sports is just seeing the whole team working together. Kind of
Yes.
like individual team performance trumps individual performance. And what I love about Baltimore is they kind of exemplify this notion of the whole way the system works in terms of how they play defense and how they play offense. It's all kind of totally coordinated, such that's how they win games. So they end up kind of wearing these teams down in the end. And I just love that. I love that aspect of sports in general because I
Oh my
think it
God, sounds like
applies really well
how
to management and
sounds like
companies. So
sounds like us
Yeah.
and the
yeah,
consumer, how we just wear them down until the end. So, but we're actually gonna learn two things and one not real
True
thing
thing.
about you.
right,
So we're
right.
gonna get to the segment of
Exactly.
two truths and a lie. So
Yeah. Are you ready, Nick? How are you feeling? Did you work on your mojo to get this
I mean, we're
going?
both just without Rick, we're both 0-1, just for the record.
You really
So
are. We
we're
suck
like
at
we're hand our whole thing on this is going to be handing up. So I will take a shot. I mean, I met you in
Okay.
person,
Is
Jason.
Rick the
So
human lie detector? I
He might
haven't.
be. He might
apparently,
be.
Okay.
Like, I
Okay.
think
So
he has a
he
good
can
way to
sniff it
read
out.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, like someone's
It's
going to come up with at some point the Watson touch.
yeah,
It's like I've got the
exactly.
Watson touch.
TM. Let's go ahead and trademark it before he can. So, all right, we're gonna get into the two truths and a lie. So, Nick, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go. All right. So, shipping/Prime is the second biggest growth driver for Amazon after price. These all are thematic, by the way. Prime customers bought 4 times as much as non-Prime.
Labor is the most expensive part. It's something that we'll get to when we get to the couple parts of this call. I think that Prime customers may have bought more than 4 times, but I'm going to hold on that. And the first one was the second growth driver at Amazon was Prime
Second biggest, yeah, after price, that
after
shipping
price.
is the second biggest growth driver, shipping/Prime.
I am going to say that number one is false.
And
What
so
is
am I
it?
supposed to score it? Wrong.
What's false?
What's the lie?
So false is the labor comment, and the point I was making there is I think transportation ends up dominating your cost structure in e-commerce, whereas people kind of spend a lot of more time on fulfillment center labor, right? And
Yeah.
I think typically what happens is, where you spend, we will typically say 2/3 to 3/4 of the cost of a shipment, actually fulfilling a shipment to a customer, comes
Yeah.
from the transportation cost. So
Can I
if you're
just
going to focus on
pick
an
on this
area,
for a second? Because I
yeah,
think
absolutely.
so. Is it because that's the lever that people feel they can control the most? Is the labor part, and the transportation part feels so much more out of control because you have the carrier dynamics, you have other competitive dynamics of just how fast you're trying to get something to the customer. Just curious.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think I mean, to some degree, you have to obviously get the package. You have to get the stuff into a package and send it out. It is important. I think from an efficiency standpoint, I think it's because there's more direct control over it.
Mhm.
And it's also very tangible. And then I think it's kind of hangover from how distribution was done kind of pre-e-commerce. That's my other theory. I
Yeah.
think
I
you
think
think of the
it's
world where you're moving stuff to stores and that ends up being the dominant cost. And I think there's kind of
Mm.
a general consensus that that's how you think about the world. But as we move into an e-commerce first world, as transportation and all of the things you can do to control that become a bigger and bigger part of your cost equation.
I guess it's interesting, and I'm kind of surprised that I didn't think about that. We have a packed agenda to kind of get through, and it's going to be amazing to have your insights. But it is something I think the consumer doesn't really think about, right? I think consumers don't think about freight from the FOB point to the distribution center, from the distribution center to the store or to them, and then the cost of returns. And I do think it's a really great point because it is a huge driver of cost increases and a huge impact of P&Ls for companies. Watson watching the show right now saying Kaplan.
Get ready to get ripped on. But
He's definitely watching, but it'll make him feel like he's.
And my chat or my phone isn't blowing up with
taunting.
So, yeah, I mean, he's a very trusting person. So, and he's super kind. So I'm sure he's like thinking things, not saying them. But we're gonna dive into some headlines. Producing is important. So here we go. Jess will tag team these. I'll start if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Headline number one.
I love it.
Like, you're here. You're in the hot seat. This week, Adobe putting out an article, I think, about using TikTok as a search engine.
Here's my take on this. And I don't disagree. I think that TikTok will be a place that people search, just like Pinterest, just like Facebook was. I posted this in our e-commerce chat in the Slack group. I recalled a 2010 interview with Mark Zuckerberg where he was telling Leslie Stahl how people aren't going to go to the internet anymore to search for cars. They're going to come into Facebook and do their research on the next Honda they're going to buy or what have you. And that didn't necessarily materialize. So I believe, yes, social networks will always have some role in information to discovery that will chip away a little bit at the Google as your kind of first point. But I just don't, we're not talking like blow up disaster here. That's my take.
Provided people stop getting their news from TikTok, I'm fine with it.
Yet another opportunity for me to get distracted on TikTok and spend an hour on that as opposed to what I'm supposed to be doing. So it worries me from that front.
Are you really going to go and find out the news of the current events and the latest on the war in Ukraine? I don't know. Not for me anyways, but maybe I'm old school. All right, give us our next headline.
Flexport did what? Like what happened? It was crazy. Give us the details on the Flexport raise from Shopify.
The thing I was trying to get straight on this one is they sold. I think a lot of Flexport's burn is coming from the unit they basically bought through stock from Shopify. So, and then now Shopify's funding them. So what a weird transfer of money. I can't keep up with how the money's transferring and how the stock is transferring and how it's all moving around. So this is a fascinating one.
So we're saying we're keeping the CFOs very busy on the balance sheet management.
Maybe they're not ready to get rid of Carta yet because their cap table must just be crazy at this point in terms of how it all wraps up. But I think with freight going down so much, this is just a really hard business, and it's so dependent on the cost of containers, as we talk about a lot. And I think I think they've gone up a little bit, maybe because of the issues in the Middle East with the Suez Canal, et cetera. But that company is just if you're valued based on what the container cost is, obviously they're going to go up a lot during the pandemic when things were $30,000, $50,000 a container, and now they're riding the wave down. But that those businesses that are that heavy on the physical side, they're just it's such a tough thing to get that right and also keep up with the tech investment, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, I have a question for you guys. Would you guys turn down a $5.6 billion check?
I mean, it would be a fun couple of days with Nick and I feel like, but
yeah. I'm asking because Macy's, we know what happened with Macy's and their takeover bid. And is this just they're negotiating? What's happening? Posturing.
Yeah.
All right. We'll get to our next step.
With Macy's, I think that there's sort of this interesting position that they find themselves in with these assets, but with this, what they won't say, but we will, a failing business model. And so I think it's sort of the board probably thinking that it has a fiduciary responsibility, probably some liability, and is looking to kind of extol its pound of flesh to the greatest degree it can. But I don't think it gets better. I don't know, Jason, if you have any opinions on the Macy's situation.
I think it's really hard for companies that have been. I mean, what do you think Macy's was worth in let's say 2010? I don't know. Pick a time point. I mean, I feel like the thing that's hard for people to swallow is just how much they've fallen to be down to a $5 billion company. Once that watermark gets set, it's really hard for people to kind of go down to this new level, and that is a massive drop. I don't remember the details of like what Macy's was worth 10, 20 years ago, but we always kind of considered them to be a world beater. They had all of the premier real estate, and kind of to see it go from where that was down to 5 billion. That's I feel like people have a hard time swallowing that.
Yeah.
So Macy's in 2015, and this is the beauty of doing the show, was 24 billion. That's its high watermark.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot to absorb in effectively 7 years
But
for that. Just to check. Okay.
As far as everyone's concerned, Google. So I do think, though, having lived this before, right, you're exactly correct. And we long ago had a company who had an offer from JCPenney that was a good offer. It was below what our board investors wanted, and they rejected the offer. And then next thing you know, JCPenney was in distress, and so ultimately were we. So I do think, people don't act in these cases like true professional investors. They act as unprofessional investors and think about what was versus what will be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you got to remove your emotion, I think, and that's really hard to do sometimes.
well, speaking of emotions and sitting in your seats, Temu, right? That was a pretty crazy announcement about its chasing acquisition and becoming the biggest advertiser, arguably in history. I mean, Temu, talk about forget about TikTok and Shein and Alibaba, like Temu.
Yeah.
Temu, who knew?
And it's like these guys come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Do we think, though, Temu has this trajectory? What's going to make Temu different from Wish? So Wish had this huge rise, similar types of products, similar challenges with lead time, and maybe Temu's fulfillment's better. I'm not sure. Wish, didn't they also buy rights to the Golden State Warriors? Was it Warriors or who? But basically, they were the sponsor. So I think there's what's really happening with Temu? Is this like a flip in the pan and they're gonna wash out, or?
Well, you guys think advertising? I've heard they have profitability problems. I mean, cost structure problems. You think that this is their way to solve that? This is kind of the Instacart play?
Throw money at it?
Well, advertising.
Yeah.
I just, I mean, that was kind of the
Think about it, right? I mean, I love this topic about customer and business value based on customer. So let's just say that Temu can acquire a customer for $100 and they've spent 2 billion, I think 1.2 billion so far in advertising with a crazy budget. But you divide, right, 1.2 billion by $100, and that's sort of the number of customers, and that those customers are going to spend a certain amount, right? And then that becomes revenue. And so the challenge is not about one-time purchase, it's like two-time purchase and three-time purchase and four-time purchase. And I don't think we as an industry can necessarily trade on the traditional lifetime value. I think 12-month value or picking some point in time that we spend against, but it has to be greater than one. And so I think that Temu is a combination of trading on future value based on a business models and a competitive set and an association and getting the benefits of that. But to your point, Jason, at some point, right, you have to show, we didn't put Netflix in the headline this week, but that was insane. I can't imagine that other businesses could find something that they could close the loophole of a shared password and benefit. But Netflix is growing its customer base. So Temu and others, as they get to the point of public exposure or transparency, has to do that too. And I don't know that they can do it. I bet you if I went around to 100 people in my neighborhood in Manhattan and asked if they knew what Temu was, most would say no.
Just worry that
it'll
the
be interesting to
LTV is
watch.
not there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. And I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, and how well can you build LTV when your ASPs are like sub $10? That's
Yeah,
another story.
people are going to move on to the next thing. The next,
Yeah, Amazon can take them out in a second because it's the same products. We'll digress. Okay, so we want to move on to our next topic, which is we talked a lot about the organization of the future. And as the retail landscape is changing, the e-commerce landscape is changing, there's been a lot of discussion about what does the next organization evolution have to look like to sustain or keep up with the pacing environment. And so I think there's a lot of things that we can even bring from the headlines this week into this topic. One is we've had these innovation centers like within Walmart completely shutting down, and innovation was such a hot topic. I think that was not only the word of the week, it was the word of the year, 8 to 10 years ago. And these innovation labs are setting up. We brought innovation teams in because our day-to-day employees and executives didn't know how to be innovative. And so we had to infiltrate the organization with a whole separate function to make them smarter. So is it just that going by the wayside and everybody has to be innovative, or what are you guys thinking or seeing?
I mean, I went to a dinner recently where everyone was touting how innovative their organizations were being. And, since I'm not really a corporate guy anymore, I was the last person at the table, like, at like Siberia, but I was there. And when it got to me, I said, guys, like, think about what you're saying. Your companies aren't being innovative to be progressive. They're being innovative to survive, to be desperate. And I think that in a lot of these companies is sort of a challenge. However, at the same time, to see what happened this week with the changes in org structures and investments and focus on innovation was disheartening.
Yeah.
I would say two things. One of my observations about the problems with this kind of model is you end up in this situation where I will see retailers that are 20 years behind Amazon in a lot of ways. Obviously, like I'm super hyper focused on the
Yeah.
logistics e-commerce side. And then they're trying to do things that are kind of 20 years ahead in these innovation centers. And it's hard to not see the disconnect in terms
Yeah.
of you really should consider kind of focusing on the blocking and tackling of getting your the things that customers we know they care about, price and availability being correct and
Mhm.
speed of shipment and all the other stuff that I'm kind of harping about. So that's the first thing. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect on what defines innovation because I think being at Amazon for so long, we solving these really hard problems I consider to be innovative even if they're not outwardly so. And then I think the second the second problem is I don't think you can build things in a vacuum. You need to think about how it fits into your overall all business model, and you're almost like kind of passing the buck by trying to build it in a separate area, as opposed to how do you figure out how to make your org efficient enough to actually roll these changes into the real business, right? The actual business. So
I think that I think it's a great point. And I think, and I'll raise this topic for us, right? Innovation is they're tactics, right? Being innovative is is a good mindset, but it's not a strategy. And I think that a lot of people think that, okay, I'm going to be innovative, be strategic as a result. So I guess, Jess, to you, right? Do you think that we're strategic? I mean, do you think that the dynamic of leadership and that we are using strategy as it should be used
No.
inside of these orgs?
I don't. I think that that's probably one of the weaknesses that we have because coming out of the pandemic, you were in fight or flight mode, right? There was so much coming at you so quickly, and you just had to react. And when you react, it's hard to be strategic and think about, well, what does the next 3 years need to look like? If you're in a company that's in distress, you don't have the time to think through, all right, what's my 3 year plan? And let me have the fortitude and the conviction to keep that plan going. And so a strategy can change from 1 year to the next to the next. And you can't make any momentum that way, right? I
mhm.
think that some of the best brands that we have seen do really strong turnarounds had a strategic vision that went out multi-years. They focused, to your point, Jason, they weren't like, oh, let's go do the next shiny thing. They focused on the things that they felt like were going to matter. They had that conviction and fortitude to make it withstand. I mean, one of the ones that stands out for me is Brian Cornell and Target. When he first joined, and he said, we're investing in stores. We are investing in how we're going to bring inventory into our stores and have this holistic logistics model that ships to store, but also, the pickup in store. And then we're going to, get our e-commerce right. I think people felt like he's smoking crack, right? Like, this isn't going to work. You're going to invest more in stores than that. Everybody's getting out of stores.
That's not a strategy. We're going to be.
You're a little bit behind.
Conquer.
Jason, to you, you talked about seeing all these different companies, and they're placing these bets in these innovation avenues. What has been difficult with them in terms of how they've tried to embrace a strategy or embrace something that feels strategic versus just either tactics, to Nick's point, or they're chasing something really shiny?
It's probably a little bit about like I'm looking for a quick fix that's going to change some things. They're looking for an approach, right, in some of these cases, but I don't have a great answer for that. I think I think there is this kind of tendency to stick your head in the sand a bit, though, on the state of your core operations, and then you kind of say, okay, good enough, and then we're going to go off and do this thing. And I think part of it just maybe comes down to not understanding how bad you're doing on the core pieces. But anyway, I think you just generally see people don't realize how poorly they're performing in core e-commerce, for example, and that's my window into the world, right? And the what I see it as is I get friends all the time that are constantly texting me, sending me emails, and saying, "Look at this delivery experience I just had, where it basically said, it doesn't tell me when I'm going to get it. It says it says maybe it'll ship in a couple days and come in 10 days, right? I mean, and this really pissed me off, and I decided not to. I just went to Amazon and bought something else, right? When are you guys going to fix this, right? So that's kind of and I just don't think people are honest about how bad some of these experiences are, because it's really hard to fix. It's going to take a lot of work.
Well, Nick, you've sat in boardrooms. Is it just come down to it's much easier to sell the shiny thing than say, hey, we're going to double down and we're going to just take the friction out of shopping. We're going to clean up our inventory. We're going to make our logistics better, because that's not what sells and gets people excited.
What I'll say is, like, yes, like we do not stay true to our visions and our strategies. We manage to a board, or we manage to private or public equity. 2, there are no silver bullets. Like, they don't exist.
Boom.
You
Exactly.
achieve your strategies, your goals, through firing a whole bunch of lead bullets. Like, that's it, period. And because we don't hear what's new, it takes you off course. And ultimately, when you play defense and you're being innovative out of desperation, you're dead. If companies realize that far sooner, they could file bankruptcy, which is a great vehicle, and transform, versus file bankruptcy to liquidate or sell the IP to another user.
Yep.
Off my soapbox again.
Now we're going to go on to your new soapbox, your other favorite soapbox, which is Rent the Runway. And I love this brand. I am a customer. I enjoy it. I like seeing my little ticker in my account that says, I've rented $10,000 or $12,000 worth of clothes, because I'm not going to spend $12,000 worth of clothes. But this company is in trouble. And Nick, I know you're going to help lead us there. But Jason, I'd love to hear your take as well, from like the logistics perspective, from the whole notion of how their business model works.
It's a really hard business model if you look at it from the logistics thing, right? I mean, the whole thing with logistics is you're trying to kind of reduce physical distance and kind of create scale. Every one of the shipments you send out is ultimately going to be sent back, right, from kind of an individual location, and how do you combine and sort those together? And I was involved a bit with this, the Amazon. I did a little bit of work on trying to analyze like how this would all fit. It's a real margin eater to have to be able to send something off which is really expensive, as I talked about earlier, and then know that it's basically going to be sent back, right? And so you're going to eat a lot into those very, very high margins, and that's what makes it tough. In order to kind of ultimately get there, there's going to have to be probably some innovation in terms of how those structures work, which I don't think they've kind of nailed at this point. Is my high level take.
Nick, what you got for
I
us?
think that it's a yield optimization model. It's not a retail business in the traditional sense, right? You need 5 or 6 months of subscription to get your money back. It's an expensive customer to acquire, and it's a really expensive business on the logistics side. You rent, you send back, you receive, you clean. The laundries are expensive, the labor
That's a good
isn't
point.
inexpensive, and then you put it away and you do it again. And we were at Fashion to Figure way back in the day, and I think that Christine Hunsaker from Castle is one of the smartest people I've met, and has been really doing a great job of evolving and figuring out that business model. Um, and they evolved into white label. And I think for a lot of brands that do it with them, it's about acquisition in the ecosystem when vertical brands have high margins to play with. Rent the Runway doesn't have the scale to produce at the 80% IMU that an Express or a New York company or a Ralph Lauren has. Doesn't have the assortment and doesn't have, in my opinion, the expertise to retail. Then when you factor in the acquisition costs, which are super high, it's a failing business model. It's a falling knife. Rent the Runway is a falling knife, and I know that you, as do many people, utilize it for what's needed, but I don't see how it survives.
Can all of them? So Newly also is a similar type model. It's in the umbrella of urban, Anthro and Free People. Is that different to you? I'm also accustomed. I do both. I interchange them. I like to spread the love
I
of my
mean,
rentals.
look, I'll call it for what it is. I mean, the litigation is there. Newly stole the litigation from Latote, and they looked at buying Latote. We ultimately at Sadia bought it with Lord and Taylor. And what's interesting is people don't know Latote ultimately bought Lord and Taylor, as the two of them desperately tried to make it work. But
Yep.
they got a big leg up on sort of the how. And look, Urban is fantastic. They're a phenomenal operator. Ideas are ideas until they're executed, and having that world-class operating and supply chain, logistics, brand, and most importantly, when you have a customer database to email and lower your acquisition expenses because you can incentivize them to come in, it makes a world of difference. So as a division inside of a consolidated P&L, I'm sure it looks great. As a
Mhm.
business that were on its own standing, it would not look great. And I don't see a ton of people jumping into this arena.
It's okay, Jess. Though we all want our kind of ZERP era benefits back. I want my $10 Ubers back.
Yeah.
Cosmo.com,
Cosmo. Oh
right? I
yeah,
want my
yeah. Where you
Cosmo
get your
back.
like your
It's like,
DVD
wait,
and a beer and a
wait, I want a
Snickers
99-cent
bar.
item and it's
Yeah.
going to come to me in 20 minutes. Oh my God, this is amazing. Wait, now I want another one in the next hour.
Well, it's fun to reminisce about the yesteryears. So we're going to move on though to you guys want your Cosmo back. The people have their happiness back. That's at least what's going down in the happiness index this week. The headlines are buzzing, and it literally happened after our show last week. So I'm a little bummed
Yeah.
about it because the University of Michigan's consumer sentiment index came out. So there's like two headlines around Michigan. Yes, their coaches ditching them. And then now we've got the sentiment index that's come out, and it is making headlines everywhere because of just the double digit growth that we're seeing, not only from December, but also just year over year. And we're reporting the highest levels it's been since 2021. And so everyone's feeling better. Inflation is cooling. It's the largest 2-month gain since 1991. And like I said, it's risen nearly 60% above the all-time low. And so people are feeling so good. And the headlines came out like this: Washington Post, economic vibes are finally improving. Axios, the economic mood is improving fast. the Wall Street Journal, consumer sentiment logs the biggest jump in decades. So everyone's feeling good, guys. We're snappy, we're happy, we're riding this wave, and as a result, markets felt a little good, but also the GDP gave it another boost as it outperformed market expectations at 3.3%. And so, how are you guys feeling? I mean, are you feeling happy?
Were you at NRF, Jess?
I wasn't. I didn't have a chance to
Okay.
go.
There was a lot of optimism. I'm personally, selling B2B SaaS, so it's
Right.
it's not necessarily a direct consumer thing, but they indirectly kind of it bleeds through that. I just felt like everyone was kind of seemed to be back in. We want to build and grow again, as opposed to 23, which I'm happy to put in the rearview mirror. It was a grinder of a year because everyone just was so unsure and uncertain, and so I feel a lot of optimism for whatever that's worth.
It was an interesting week. The markets went nuts. I think that there was a lot of momentum behind that. And I think that while the numbers themselves, both with wage increases and the, um, you know, our happiness index, I will be the thorn in your side, Jess. I apologize, but my daughter looked out the window the other day and she's like, "Daddy, what are they doing?" And she's 7, and they were like putting the boot on a car and then like towing it. And she's like, "Well, why do they do that?" I'm like, "Well, because people don't make their car payments, they take their car back." And I think that that's real. It's almost like when someone comes in and says, "We're up 30%." Okay, great, but you were down 60% last year. So you're comping that number. It's a false positive. And I think that we are on some level with wages. If you look at some of these numbers that we put together, 55% of Americans or greater are living paycheck to paycheck. And most of them don't have like 3 months of savings, which is needed for job loss. A lot of them are in hourly positions and don't have benefits. And when you think about, missed payments, late payments, and then what that does to a person's credit rating and the death spiral that effectively as a consumer it sends you into, it's tough. And so I can't dispute the numbers. They were good. I think that they are not telling the story about the American consumer and family and its inability. MIT did the living wage survey, and I looked at it today. And in New York City, where I live, you need $88,000 salary for a family of 4. Okay, I go into CVS, I go into Walgreens, I go in to get a burger, I go in to pick anything up, gas. Those people aren't making $88,000. I'm still a bear on the next 6 months. I'm hearing just what Jason's hearing. There's positivity potentially coming. I just think that there's still a reckoning with debt, election, uncertainty, and most importantly, the inability of people to have a living wage.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of moving parts. I feel like people can tell me just about anything about the economy, and I'll like scratch my, say like, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. Geopolitical pressure, etc. I do think that with the consumer index though, if you think about what's happened since 2020 with just the inflation that's the kind of year over year, we've gone down to lower growth rate in inflation. It took a while to kind of absorb those multiple years of 10-20% inflation, right? And so I think part of this is just the lag effect of getting through that in terms of these consumer indexes.
I'll make one more point, and this is from experience. We were negotiating a private label credit card deal with someone who shall remain nameless, and they ultimately turned us down because our consumer paid their bills on time. And so I think that if you look at the predatory nature of credit, the necessity and the pitfall, we have issues. And I think that we don't and can't regulate ourselves to spend within our means, but we can't do that because we don't have the means to live in this. We're in this really interesting place that I think still has to be worked out. So sorry, Jess.
Thanks
I'm a
for
very
bringing.
negative. I'm very negative this
Yeah,
week.
thanks for bringing your clouds on my rainbow. The time has really flown by. I cannot believe we're 46 minutes in. For those of you that have hung with us, thank you so, so much. Jason, there's like a million more questions I wanted to ask you. So we're probably going to have you back. But before we drop, we do want to have you reveal your word of the week. And I hear there's a really good story behind it. So let's hit it.
You guys asked for a word of the week. I chose flywheel. I think flywheel is an interesting one from the standpoint of where we are and what's changed in terms of kind of the economy over the last several years. And if you were at Amazon, you've seen the napkin drawing of kind of the flywheel. Obviously, we put it on everything. It's really cool. It's like it would be on our. We did a weekly metrics review for the business for the whole, for all of the and it was the front page, kind of always just in your face, showing you this is why we're doing what we do. Do I have a tattoo of it? Maybe. No. The thing that's interesting about it, it's kind of at a high level, it's kind of saying like your cost structure affects your growth, and your growth affects your cost structure, right? And there's a bunch of pieces in it that made it really cool. But those two factors are interesting to me because I think over the last 10 years in kind of the ZERP era, we saw unbridled growth, right? Based on kind of factors that weren't attached to a real business model. And I think the word of the day in the VC space has kind of come to like responsible growth or viable growth. And we've gone back to this model where we're attaching the business to, we're kind of thinking about businesses in terms of what's actually feasible as opposed to, can I grow at any cost? Because ultimately, just like we talked about with the Innovation Center, it doesn't necessarily tell you anything. So I love this concept of the flywheel. I think it really applies well to the e-commerce space, especially the e-commerce logistics space, because typically if you can improve your cost structure, you're going to be able to reinvest that money into improved customer experience. And if you improve your customer experience, delivery experience specifically, you're going to be able to take those gains in revenue and reapply that back to your cost structure through the advantage of having more scale and technology to support that. And so I think it was something that was developed in the early 2000s, pre-ZERP, but I think it's become in favor again today because it's so applicable to the way that I believe people should be thinking about their businesses, as opposed to just throw money at the problem and hope to figure it out later. So
I love it. Can I ask you one last question? Is every business capable of building a flywheel, or does it only apply in certain business models?
I think that it's a mental model. I think it applies. My personal belief is it applies at some level to every business, right? That wants to grow and get bigger. Yeah. I think at the extremes, obviously, the Amazons of the world with scale that the world has never seen is gonna shine, right? But I think you can't, just back to my point, you have to think about as you grow, what is it going to do to your cost structure and how do you keep up with that? And then how do you kind of leverage the fact that you are applying your scale and actually improving your cost structure with it, those two factors. And if Amazon, you kind of looking back at my years there, one of the interesting things was they were probably the company that was the absolute best at leveraging their scale. And I think that's a lesson that we can all take away. As you grow, you need to find a way to use that advantage for your business.
It is amazing.
Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, this is a fantastic conversation.
Thank you so much.
Jason,
it was great to talk to you guys.
Here. You can't leave yet because we have to see your dance moves. That is the Watson Weekend tradition. So we always end with a little chair dance, and so you got to show us what you got.
So you got to do
you can do the robot. You can do the little shoulder.
Wait, you didn't get the memo for the choreographed TikTok dance that we're doing?
No, I had. That's all I got from the chair. So thank you guys.
All right. Thank you for being here. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Good weekend, people.